Hey there, this is Natalie, and it's time to look at another mystery we were left with at the end of Arc 6. If you've already watched my video about the mystery of how Volcanica knows Patrash, then this is going to be a similar format. I'm going to talk about what the mystery is, what we know of past events and ReZero lore that could feed into it, and some of the possibilities in terms of what could be going on, as well as which theories I'm leaning towards. But in this video we're going to be looking at one of the very biggest mysteries from Arc 6, I suppose. The cliffhanger, in fact. Where are Subaru, Rui and Rem, and why doesn't Rem know who Subaru is? To recap what got us here, after the fighting's over, Leibat and Kaitos is dead, with Roy Alphard restrained and Louis Arneb having retreated, seemingly beaten by her own breakdown as a result of experiencing repeated deaths during Subaru's phase of gathering information about how to tackle the various challenges of the tower. Rem still hasn't woken up, and the plan is for Julius to use his divine protection, which draws spirits to him, to try to talk to the mysterious spirit in the green room. Throughout this arc, this spirit hasn't said anything, but just remains in its room, taking the form of lots of moving plants, and has healed anyone who was left there, with the exception of Rem. It was already established that Rem couldn't be healed by magic because she isn't actually wounded or sick, and since Felix, the best healer in Lagunica, wasn't able to do it, it wasn't really a surprise to anyone that the spirit didn't have an effect on her condition either. She was left here for most of the time in the Pleiades watchtower, however, except for during part of Ram's fight with Lei when Patrash brought her out because Lei was after her, because it was the safest place for her. In this moment, Subaru and Ram are the only ones in the green room with Rem, as everybody else has gone with Emilia to see Volcanica on the top floor. Subaru had passed out from the exhaustion of the battle, where he'd been using his Corleonis ability to take on a lot of the burden for first Ram and then Mei Li, so he was brought to the green room to recover. Ram's there because she's watching over Rem and because she already saw Volcanica. Ram puts forward a theory she has as to why, since she defeated Leibat and Kaitos, Emilia's name, which was eaten during the battle, was returned, with people now remembering Emilia, but Rem was still asleep. It's worth noting that Julius's name hasn't been returned either, but he believes this is because he was eaten by Roy Alphard and Roy is still alive, sealed in crystal. The idea there was that killing him may not restore the names and memories of his victims anyway, and that it therefore may have been better to keep him alive and captive for questioning, much as Sirius, the Sin Archbishop of Wrath, was captured by Priscilla in Arc 5 and is currently being detained. But, well, also, we couldn't really have people like Priscilla and Julius killing Sin Archbishops. What would happen to the witch factors? Incidentally, it is said that people who have divine protections cannot also have authorities, and Julius and Priscilla do both have divine protections. Priscilla has the divine protection of the sun, and Julius has the divine protection of gathering spirits. Or, well, if you watched my Google Translate videos on some of the new chapters, you'll know what Google Translate thinks Julius's divine protection is called. But the less said about that, the better. It's unknown what would have happened if they had killed the Sin Archbishops that they were fighting, but it doesn't seem like they would be eligible to have the witch factors pass over to them, as they did with Subaru for sloth and greed. Ram has the divine protection of clairvoyance, which we saw her use a lot in the fight with Lei, so she wouldn't be able to get an authority either, at least as far as we understand the rules of this sort of thing currently. But the situation with her having killed Lei and any potential killing of Roy by Julius is further complicated by the fact gluttony was 3 people to begin with. I think perhaps Subaru attaining the gluttony authority, given everything that's happened in this arc, may not be a simple case of him killing the Sin Archbishops in any case. He was already carrying the gluttony witch factor from Rui around for part of the arc, and so I think it's probable that whatever we're going to see happening here with Rui and Subaru will result in him gaining a gluttony witch factor somehow, regardless of whether Roy or Rui are left alive. I could even see a possibility where Subaru actually doesn't gain an authority of gluttony at all, and instead just forms an alliance with Rui, whereby when the time comes for him to need all of the witch factors, to open whatever those doors are under the watchtower, She would once again put her witch factor inside him and kinda go with him. She is a lolly after all, and Subaru is the lollymancer. Summoning her from the Hall of Memories for some big endgame thing would be on brand for him. But I digress. Back to Ram's theory. She talks about how she thinks that the reason Emilia's name came back was because it had only just been eaten when Lei was killed. She thinks that maybe it takes some time for gluttonies to digest the people they eat, and therefore people eaten a while ago, like Rem and the other known victims in Pristella, may not have been as easy, or possible even, to salvage by killing Lei or Roy. This is just Ram's theory on what could have happened, and I would suspect that she's going to be either wrong or only partially correct. It feels like they need an idea to work on here, and she's a smart character who can provide one, but it also feels like having Ram just figure out the answer at this point and being fully correct about it would be, well, not the kind of thing Tappei usually goes for. Usually, if we're going to have an answer be available to Subaru straight away, it will be provided by a character with established special knowledge or insight. So, of characters present in the tower, if Beatrice or Echidna had put this forward, I'd say it would have a much higher chance of being completely right. When it's someone who's actively trying to think through a problem, like Ram and Subaru here, they will usually not have enough information to come to the right answer, but will be able to think of a hypothesis to start investigating. I think maybe the idea that something happens in time to process people Lei and Roy eat may be correct, but that perhaps, rather than a digestion, this actually refers to them giving their victims to Rui. Rem was definitely given to Rui, we know that for sure, but Emilia probably wasn't, because Lei was busy fighting right from the time he ate her, and Rui was also in an unclear but not usual state. That's just my theory, but it would be something that Subaru could think of based on having the extra information Ram doesn't about Rui. Ram therefore giving him the idea to investigate, and Subaru having the additional knowledge of the situation to come up with something more from it. In any case, we don't have time for this to be discussed more, or for Subaru to get Julius down there to talk to the Green Room Spirit, because suddenly the scene changes. The Green Room Spirit has disappeared, and in the middle of the room, on the ground sleeping, appears Rui Arneb. This should be impossible. Rui doesn't have a physical body and only appears as she does inside the Hall of Memories, which she can't leave without using someone else's body. So how can she be here, looking the same as she did to Subaru in the Hall of Memories, as a lolly with ridiculously long blonde hair? And then next, the Witch of Envy attacks. In the previous scene with Emilia and the others at the top of the tower, the scene ended with Emilia noticing something approaching in the distance, and I think that something was black shadows. I think what's likely here is that the Witch of Envy is appearing because Rui knows about Return by Death. The place where the Witch of Envy is sealed is very close to the watchtower, and this is why her miasma is all around, and we have seen her attack at the end of most of the loops where amnesiac Subaru, who had part of Rui inside him, was testing out battle strategies. It seems likely that her arrival is caused by Rui having learned about Return by Death, even though Subaru didn't explicitly tell her. Remember that Echidna already knew when Subaru told her to, and this also triggered the witchy bitch fit, so it seems like her becoming aware that someone else shares the secret is the trigger, rather than him actually saying the words. I'd guess that she either can't see what happens inside the Hall of Memories and so doesn't know what was discussed there, but as soon as someone who knows Subaru's secret becomes present in the real world, she becomes aware of it and makes her attack. In the previous loops, Rui was present inside Subaru, and now she's present somehow physically. Subaru grabs both Rem and Rui and is carrying them when he meets the shadow, as he tries to follow Ram out of the no longer green room. Just as he thinks he's about to be swallowed up, vowing that next time around he will save everyone, suddenly there's a blue light. Volcanica is intervening. The next thing Subaru knows, he's waking up in a field with something licking his face. He assumes it's Patrash, but it isn't. It's Rui, who is now also awake. Subaru tries to talk to her, but it seems she can't speak. She can only make weird noises. Subaru quickly throws her off of him and tries to find Rem. She's also somewhere in this strange field type place, and she's still sleeping. Subaru here kind of breaks down. The desperation and frustration of not knowing what the hell just happened and where he is, and what's happened to the tower, especially when he was already so exhausted, but at the very least thought the problems of the tower were over, causing him to fall to his knees crying. But that's when he sees that Rem is waking up. And here we get the big reveal, as Rem asks who Subaru is. He had already considered that when Rem woke up, she might not have her memories back, and so this is more of a confirmation of a problem he'd already thought about being a reality than a huge shock to him. He replies that he is her hero, and the scene, the chapter, and the arc ends. So there are 3 immediate mysteries here. Where are they? What's happened to Rui? And why is Rem now awake without knowing who Subaru is? When it comes to where they are, all we know is that it's some kind of field, and so probably not just the outside surroundings of the watchtower, which would be in the desert. The only place we've seen before that has a similar appearance is Echidna's dream citadel, and based on the fact Volcanica seemed to send them here to protect them from the Witch of Envy, I think this, like that and the Hall of Memories, is a place outside of space and time. This is important because it makes it possible for Tappei to have Subaru spend some time here sorting things out with Rui and Rem, without it meaning that problems will arise with things like Subaru and Beatrice being separated for a while. If Arc 6 is going to begin where this chapter leaves us, and I can't really see how else it could begin, though perhaps the next scenes that resolve what happens to the tower during the witch attack and what happens here with Subaru, Rem and Rui will be more an Arc 6 interlude, much as us seeing what happened to Rem and Crush after the events of Arc 3 was presented in an interlude between Arcs 3 and 4. Then I think it will be important to know if time Subaru spends here is an important factor, whether he really needs to get back to Beatrice due to the terms of their contract, or whether there could be a fairly lengthy period of these 3 together in this place without significant time passing for the others. But there is also a problem with this idea. They were sent here to be safe from the witch, and if this was a place similar to the Dream Citadel, the issue there would be that their bodies would still be in the place they were. From what we've seen, when characters go to places where only the consciousness goes, like Echidna's Dream Citadel, the Trials in the Sanctuary, or the Hall of Memories, the body just stays where it was. And so either the witch could still swallow up their bodies, or when they return from this place, if it is outside of normal time, she'll still be there about to swallow them. I think it's likely then that this place is something that is both magical but also physically accessible, and that their bodies are really there, but there's something special about the place that will prevent the witch from finding them, and also perhaps keep them outside of the normal passing of time. Going by the geographical location of the Pleiades Watchtower, which is at the very eastern edge of Lagunica, as well as being close to the Witch's Seal, it's also close to the Great Waterfall, that is, the edge of the world. There was a lot of discussion in Arc 6 about where people in this world think people like Subaru come from, and the most common explanation they have for people who seem to be from, well, somewhere else, is that they come from beyond the waterfall. There's a chance then that where they've been sent is somewhere beyond the waterfall, which, given it's such a mysterious place, could meet these criteria, plus have all kinds of other interesting stuff about it. But there's another theory I have that is a bit more crackpot, but still kinda worth considering, and that is that Echidna used to live on a floating island that she created that was close to the Great Waterfall, so possibly Volcanica somehow sent them there. Volcanica knew Echidna, that was reiterated in her Book of the Dead passage in Arc 6, and we know that Volcanica has something to do with why Echidna is in her dream citadel to begin with. Maybe Echidna's old home is close to the watchtower, which would also go some way towards explaining why Scarf Donna could remember how to get to the watchtower and nothing else. Where Echidna definitely had her enemies in life, such as Hector, we can probably assume her island was protected in all kinds of ways. Maybe it's still there, enabling Volcanica to transport Subaru, Rem and Rui there to evade the witch. Perhaps while they're here, there will be some echidna-related discoveries to be made, making it more interesting than just another magical field outside of normal reality, while also meeting the criteria of being a place that physically exists, and that may plausibly be protected or hidden from the Witch of Envy in a way Volcanica might know about. There's more we can do with this idea too. Volcanica is senile. He thought Emilia was Satella. Does he perhaps think it's still the old days and think he's sending these people to Echidna herself for protection? It's just a theory, but I like it more in terms of its potential for interesting developments than it just being some convenient, safe place outside of what's going on, where whatever's going to play out between Subaru, Rem and Rui can happen undisturbed. What do you guys think? Now, the second mystery. What's happened to Rui? We don't have much information to go on with this, really, given it's likely that the Green Room spirit was important to this, seeing as it disappeared around the same time Rui managed to materialise in her own body, and we know almost nothing about the spirit, given that this happened before they could learn about it using Julius to communicate with it. Rui has only ever been able to experience the world outside of the Hall of Memories before using other people's bodies, for instance by taking over her brother's bodies or by using solar eclipse. But here she appears as herself and seems to be unconscious at first, so it doesn't look like this is something she's done intentionally of her own accord. But it seems like she may have been able to take form using the spirit somehow, since its form is gone, but we really don't know enough about the spirit to get much from that. When Subaru wakes up, Rui is licking his face, and she can only make strange noises rather than talk. This might lead to some thinking about some connection to Patrash, like maybe she's somehow taken on Patrash's memories and behaviours or something, but that seems kind of unlikely, given it was only a couple of chapters ago we saw Lei specifically talking about how the authority of gluttony couldn't be used on ground dragons. I'd guess the licking is more likely Rui's own behaviour as the Sin Archbishop of Gluttony, though unless she's lost her own memories, which is possible I guess, she shouldn't think she should be able to eat Subaru, having already eaten him once. It was also established in this arc that she couldn't eat him twice. Maybe she's just licking him to wake him up because she can't speak, and using her tongue to do it is just a gluttony thing? If you want to hear a crack theory for this one though, it's possible perhaps that the Green Room spirit picked up memories from Patrash as it was healing her, given Patrash was in the Green Room for most of the arc. Perhaps the spirit, as a healing entity, has some kind of special empathy that lets it understand the people and creatures it's healing, and that by spending time around Patrash more than anyone else from the party other than Rem, who it couldn't heal, it took on some of Patrash's nature, and this is now what's coming out in Rui's behaviour. But that's really just me making wild guesses at what could be going on here. As for Rui not being able to speak, there was some stuff in her chapters in Arc 6 relating to her and speech, so it's possible that it's just not normal for her to be able to speak outside of the Hall of Memories, and that's all that's happening here. But it's also possible that this is something to do with the Green Room spirit, or to something else about Rui's current condition. Still, Subaru's priority is not to find the answers to what's up with Rui, but first to check that the other person he was carrying, Rem, is safe. And of course, that brings us to the third, and of course most high-profile mystery. Why does Rem ask who Subaru is? Now let's leave the troll option that she's just joking alone and move on to the two main real possibilities here. The first being that Rem does have her other memories but's forgotten Subaru because his name has been eaten, or something similar to that. And the second being that Rem has woken up with amnesia. The first option seems less likely, but is potentially possible. When Subaru had his memories eaten, he didn't forget them, even though Rui could see them as normal, suggesting that Subaru is resistant to the effects of having his memories eaten, just as he's able to remember other people whose names are eaten, and has some resistance to other authorities. It would seem that this would mean Subaru should also be resistant to the effects of having his name eaten, But since that's something that would affect other people's memories and not Subaru's own, it's possible whatever resistance he had wouldn't stop people forgetting him. It should be that if Subaru has had his name eaten, because he had his memories eaten earlier, he would end up as Sleeping Beauty Subaru, given that's what happens if both are eaten. But the fact he wasn't affected by having his memories taken may protect him from that. So I think it's possible that if this is what Tappei's going with, and Rem doesn't have amnesia but Subaru had his name eaten, it could be explained. As a crack theory, maybe Rui ate Subaru's name, thinking it would make the Witch of Envy forget him, and would therefore keep him safe after they arrived here. But it doesn't really feel like the more likely option. Having Subaru lose his memories for a large part of Arc 6, only to have everyone else forget him in Arc 7, could be a bit frustrating. It would certainly be interesting in some ways, but it feels like too large of a change to things to sustain for very long, much as it would have been for Emilia's name to have remained eaten. It would mean a lot of intricate knock-on effects, depending on things like whether witches and gospels and books of the dead, all of which currently know of Subaru's existence, would be affected. And I don't know that those kinds of complications are the type that feel right to be adding at this stage in the story. I think then that if Subaru has had his name eaten, it will be something that's resolved in this place with Rui, and he'll be back to normal by the time he sees any other characters. That could have been a cool thing to have in just for this one bit, just to raise the intrigue about what's going on with Rem, but I can't see it being a longer term choice for the story, where we already explored the reverse of it with Amnesia Subaru so recently. As for Rem having lost her memories, that certainly seems like the more likely thing, especially given it was something Subaru and Ram had both wondered about. It's also the thing with the easiest possible explanation, given we know that Rui discarded Rem's memories in the Hall of Memories, which is why she was able to appear and give Subaru the stand-up speech. And so it's possible that while her name could have been returned to her, perhaps by Lei being killed, perhaps by Rui deciding to return it, or perhaps, crack theory, a bit of Volcanica's blood got on her while he was chucking them off to wherever this is. But her memories couldn't be returned because they're just roaming around freely in the Hall of Memories. That would make for a good reason why Rui is here in this scene too, because Subaru had lost the way to get back to the Hall of Memories through Reed Estrella's book, where Reed was defeated and so his book is no longer empty. And while he may still be able to get back using the Natsuki Subaru book, that seemed like a dodgy idea. Maybe the next thing to happen will be Rui, Subaru and Rem trying to find a way back from where they are now to Rui's home, where Rem will be able to merge back with her own memories like Subaru was able to. So that's about all of my thoughts on these Arc 6 ending mysteries, and I'm definitely very excited for Arc 7 to start so we can find out what's going on here, because unlike the mystery with Patrash and Volcanica that I covered in my last video, I think this set of things will have to be dealt with pretty much immediately as the story picks up. But what do you guys think? Let me know your theories, no matter how weird they are, in the comments. As always, please leave a like and subscribe if you want to see more ReZero content, including further Arc 6 mysteries and Arc 7 speculation. Thank you for watching, and I hope to see you again very soon.